And like I told Cam, that's the kind of thing that we can do when you're locked in and you're paying attention to what we're doing, and you're not, doing bonehead moves. And you know, he, I mean, he was locked in today. I got to give him that, man. He really was. He did great. But I expect that, man. You know, you're working, 3 days a week. I hadn't worked in a week. I expect you to be, trained to go. And I know a lot of guys, come in the comments and say, well, you just need to fire him. No, I really don't have to. Because if I fire him, then I got to hire somebody else. And I basically had a talk with him. And I basically just told him, how guys like, business owners look at things. And he's underage, so he doesn't know a lot of these things. It just never occurred to him. I'm giving him free game. He's learning a lot out here about not just how to do this work. But he's learning about how things work, how people are, and the concept that if he don't show up for work, how it affects more than just, well, I'm not getting paid. That's what a lot of guys say. Well, you're not having to pay me. Yeah, but that's the least of the problems. Because guys like me, and I'll just tell y'all like I told him, see, guys like me, we don't have to do all that work. The only reason why we got all that work is to hire guys like you. And then when guys like you don't want to come to work, well, we have to ask ourselves, guys like me have to ask ourselves, okay, I don't even need to do this work, right? I don't need to take on these customers if I didn't have to pay the labor. So if I didn't have to pay you, then I wouldn't need all these customers. And then, okay, we'll flip it all the way around. I'll pay you really good, right? And you're not disciplined, and you got things in your personal life that you're not, that you're in control of or whatever. Well, now you're making really good money, and you're taking that money and you're doing knucklehead stuff with it. So now you're broke and you're pressuring me for more work. And then I create more work, you get more money, then you're a knucklehead with the money, and then you miss 2 days of work. But I still created all that work that you're not even here to do now. Yeah. And that's how, that's a part of how us guys look at this kind of thing. And I never had a boss break it down to me like that when I was, his age. And I always worked somewhere. But the mindset that, well, if I don't come to work, you don't have to pay me. Well, that's not going to cut it. It's not. Because what happens is guys get more money, then they just buy better dope. They run around with, better women or more expensive people. Or they become the big dog in their group. Because they got more money than any of the other teenagers. So they end up drinking better booze, staying out later and all that, only to come to work hungover. And then you see how at the end of the day, the employer is funding, even though they're having to work, is funding all that bullcrap so they can be late or miss work tomorrow. Don't get me on that shit, man, because that is so, it's like, and then when you look at it, a lot of guys like me where we're disciplined and we know what it takes to do this, then I start asking myself, well, if I didn't have to pay him, I could drop them 3 properties over there. And then I could just do these 6 right here. I don't need them 3 because I ain't got to pay nobody. But then guys call, well, I want to work, I want to work, I want to work. You give them a job, and it is having a guy out here does make my life easier. No, I'm not saying that. But having a guy out here that don't show up for work, that makes my job 10 times harder to keep it going. You got to be able to keep it going if you're a guy like me, where you don't want to take on more work than what you can do, like I always talk about, because you're going to have days where it rains, right? And you're going to have days where guys don't come to work. And, you know, for me, the time savings and the pay does not resonate with me as being to my advantage when I have to go days where I'm worried about a guy coming to work. And the only reason why I got all this work is because he's wanted a job. And that is, I'm telling you, that's the story of, and then guys like me that have built this thing from nothing. I said nothing. And it's a personal thing too, because, well, ain't nobody give me this business. I created it, and I've worked it, and I've grinded in it, and I've done, you know, all the things I've done to get to today. So I get an attitude when guys start playing games. And then they get mad at me. Oh, you didn't do what you said you was going to do. Well, that's because you standing me up. Now you fair game. I don't, and if you get too much work and depending on a guy, then you have to bow down to the labor, because if you don't, there's no way you can do all the work. I've been there. And trust me, if you don't have a guy that's locked in, that is, that you know, a guy like Phil, which there are few and far between out here, if you don't have a guy like that, then you're in trouble. You can go under behind that. You can lose a lot of customers and everything. And that's been the repetitive pattern of this game in my world, in you know, in my business. And we can say you don't pay them enough, and we can say this and that. That's all just noise. Because I know what other landscapers around here pay, and they don't pay like I pay. Not even close. And a guy like me, well, you know, I get an attitude, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to drop them 3 customers. I don't need them because I don't have to pay nobody. But once you commit to that, right? If you're a guy like me, and this is just general information that I see, and I got a disclaimer. But once you do that and start dropping customers because the labor don't come to work, well, then what happens is well, now the labor's ready to come back to work, but you ain't got no work for them because you done dropped all the work to justify their pay. And then they come crawling back, you know, wanting to work. And then, you know, being a business owner, you want to try to make more money, and you can make more money when you got help. Even if it is spotty help, you can still make more money. But the headache, are you prepared for the headache? See, I don't want to deal with the headache. Now, if I was desperate for money all the time and wasn't smart with my money on the other end, and my expenses were sky high, and I was always doing, you know, knucklehead stuff, then I'll be forced to live in that trap. That's what it is, where I have to bow down to the help. And see, I'm not built like that. I'll quit the whole business before I do that. So that's good. That tells you right there, I'm never going to be a big business. I accepted that years ago, though. But what I am going to be is a lucrative business. And I'm going to live a good life. And I'm not going to struggle for nothing. And I'm not going to be stressing over guys coming to work. So we'll keep their they come out here and they want to make more money. They and I want to pay them more money. I do. Then they have a lapse in judgment, and it ends up costing me, big headache because of their lack of judgment on, they ain't even in the truck with me. They at home, or whatever. And then they come back out here like nothing's different. And a lot of times it's all the way different, because if they pull that crap enough, then guys like me, we just gonna drop properties. And then, well, now you went from 5 days a week to 2 days a week, and you keep playing games. You're gonna go to 0 days a week, because in the background I'm gonna be steady picking customers that I'm gonna have to drop their property because I don't want to pay, and I don't want to be held at hostage by the labor. And what really is upsetting guys like me is when the labor knows that. That's what used to upset me with Bo. Bo knew that I needed him out here, and then I needed him more than he needed the money. And once you get there, it's just a matter of time before it's all gonna fall apart. And I told Cam all this today, just exactly what I just told y'all. And I said, you can be that guy if you want to be that guy. I said, I said, or you can be the guy that is not that guy. And these are not lawn landscape lessons. These are life lessons I'm teaching this young man. And if I wish that I had a Ray in my life when I was his age, spitting real game at me, because when I was his age, the guys that I worked for, they were just greedy fuckers for the most part. They didn't explain anything to me. They say, hey, grab a shovel, man, and move that pile over there on the back of that truck. They didn't explain the why. They didn't, give any life advice or nothing. Not that I would be receptive of it, and not that they might not even have had any life advice either. But I've lived through a lot of stuff in my life, and so it's made me pretty rounded. And my BS meter is very accurate. So, and I'm not doing these young men justice if I don't school them on life when I see that it applies. Well, you ain't their daddy. I don't want to be their daddy. Trust that. But I don't want them to come out here thinking one thing about life and it being something totally different. They're going to have a real, just like my channel, they're going to have a real, true life view of what the working world is really like, and what people in the working world are really like, and what bosses expect from them and is going to expect from them in their life. So I told the young man today, he says, man, I don't think I'm going to go back to school. I said, what? This is real shit I'm going to tell y'all. I said, what? He's like, yeah, man, I don't think I'm going to go back to school. I said, why? What else you got to do? He said, I'm out here making money. I said, no, dog. No, man. No. I'm not going to contribute to you not going back to school. And I said, so know that if you don't go back to school, you're not going to be working out here. And in the wintertime, it's not like it is right now. You can do whatever you want to do, but know that if you don't go back to school, coming out here and working and making money is not something that I'm going to want to do. And enable you not to go back to school. Even though I'm not a big freaking school guy, uh, but at his age, he needs to be in school. Not for the curriculum, not for the academic stuff, but though that's, he needs to be in school to learn how to deal with people, to learn how to communicate with elders, to learn how to communicate with his peers, to learn how to be, accountable and responsible. And not that school teaches you all that, but it lets you, well, you got to be somewhere. And that's what I told him. I said, yeah, I'm not gonna, sponsor that, if you will. I said, but I'll tell you what I will do. You go back to school, I'll let you work on the weekends. And I said, you can work 1 or 2 days on, you can work, 1 or 2 days on the weekends, and you can make as much money as somebody that works at McDonald's all week. So he said, for real? I'm like, yeah, I'll let you work on the weekends. I said, but if you don't go back to school, dude, I'm not going to generate a bunch of work for somebody that that's your age and where I think that you need to be in school. Ray, you can't do that. Yeah, I can. That's just it. I can. That's a part of being self-employed, and that's a part of being grown, and that's a part of being a productive member of society. I'm not going to enable him not to go to school and me say it's okay. Kidding me? I'm not going to do that. And if you don't go to school, you can't get a driver's license. That would be motivation enough for me. And I told him, I said, dude, go to school, get your driver's license, work on the weekends. Then next summer, you'll have a driver's license. And then, I'm not saying I'm going to let somebody drive the other truck, but you got more of a chance of driving the other truck if you got a driver's license than if you don't. And we can kind of pencil in some little stuff for them here and there, and hey. But if you don't go to school, you're not going to get a license. Well, now you're not such an asset. It's real talk. This is how the world works. You got to be an asset. Right, you dip way off into his personal shit. Well, that's well, I don't know what to say to that. Maybe more people should do that to keep these young men as responsible as you can. I don't expect guys that come out here and work for me to be like me. I don't expect that. But I do expect them to be logical. And I'm not going to create a job so a guy don't have to go to school. You kidding me? Ain't no way. That'll never happen. Never. Because what you're doing then is, if you're a boss and you're doing that, you're sabotaging that young man's life. Shame on you for doing that. I'm not going to do that. Not ever. So, right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to do that. I got to be able to sleep at night, and I got to know that I'm doing the right thing. Contrary to what these haters on YouTube think about me, contrary to what people think, really, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do, because my moral meter is very accurate, and I know that. I don't have to have men around me telling me that. So it's going to be very beneficial for him to go to school, and I made it very clear to him. So he best get his ass in school. And then, but if you don't go to school, I'm not gonna support that decision. I'm not. Not at 16 years old. If you're 18 or 19, okay, and you can't seem to get your shit together, get out of school, to graduate or whatever, then okay. But at 16, no, man. You need to go to school. Even though I know that school don't teach you everything. But the alternative to that is what? Running the streets? No, man. And I know that the young man I have out here now, he's a smart kid. He is. Smart kid. He really is. I mean, no lie. But I don't want to contribute to him falling through the cracks of society, you know, and not maybe reaching some of his potential. Not that what I do or say is going to really change anything, but it might. If he finds out he don't have a job if you don't go to school, eh, that might make him go to school. You know, if he knows that he can work on the weekends and go to school, that might motivate him to go to school. But he knows if he don't go to school, then I'm not working him. I'm not even going to work him at all. I'll use the power of a job or not, well, to make the juvenile do what he needs to do for him. Not for me. Well, Ray, you can't do things like that. But I can, and I will, and I am. I'll show you. That's the benefit of being in my spot. Now, if you got a bad moral compass and you got bad intentions and you just a greedy fuck, and there's a lot of guys in my spot that are just like that, then, you know, they got to sleep at night. But I am of moral character, and I'm not gonna do that. And so he knows that. So now we'll see. You know, if he decides not to go to school, then we know what it is. And I think that I really think that he wants to go to school. You know, and maybe me pushing that one little push will take him over the edge to go back to school. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. Just maybe. If you can just save one guy from the dumb shit. Well, society's ruthless, man. And these kids, they have no idea how bad and how ruthless society really is. They need to stop it. Stop it.